Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, musicians, artists, you name it, across all the world of crypto and blockchain. And today, I have an amazing guest. He was probably one of my first 10 guests when I first started podcasting, and I'm really excited about this interview. His name is Dr. Drew Miller. He is the founder and the CEO of Fortitude Ranch. Drew, welcome.
Thanks, Jamil. It's great to be on your show.
It's great to have you back. Happy to have you. So let's kick things off. And the first question is this, is what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Well, first, I feel like I should explain what in the world does Fortitude Ranch, a survival community, have to do with crypto? And then the quick answer, which I hope we can talk about later, is that we have a cryptocurrency utility token of Fortitude running on the Ethereum blockchain, and you can use it to buy membership in Fortitude Ranch. And Fortitude Ranch is a survival community. We're the nation's largest. We're in 7 locations now, expanding rapidly now with franchising. And in good times, we're a vacation place. We have remote locations, facilities, and our members come there and can vacation, hike, recreate and enjoy themselves. But when the shit hits the fan, and that's actually the term we use in the prepper community, when things go bad, for example, a real pandemic, loss of the electric grid, when there's a collapse, meaning the economy's not functioning and there's loss of law and order, trying to survive in a big city or even a suburb, even some small towns, will be risky with people, starving to death, stealing and killing if they need to survive. So our members come to Fortitude Ranch and we turn into a survival community. So that's what we're about. Oh, and you asked about my background. So I'm an Air Force colonel. I was an intelligence officer, so I'm well aware of the threats. I retired in 2010. And there's been just a huge misperception amongst the public. And I think it's one the government and politicians kind of deliberately promote. There's the perception that, at the end of the Soviet Union and US being the sole superpower, that, we have a lot less risk of a military or other disaster. And it's just the opposite. Because of new technologies, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, bioengineering, as well as the fact that more and more nations and even individuals and terrorist groups have the ability to, develop a nuclear weapon, develop and release a virus, cause tremendous damage that you couldn't in the past. The security of the United States is getting worse every year. There's an increasing probability every year that we're going to face a disaster that again leads to what we call a collapse, meaning the economy is not functioning, people aren't going to work, and there's widespread loss of law and order. So my background as an Air Force intelligence officer and then a longtime prepper is the reason that I started Fortitude Ranch, because I realized that I can't keep my family alive on my own. You need a lot of people if you're going to survive a collapse, because you've got to have a lot of guards on duty 24/7. So it takes a big group. It takes a survival community to survive a collapse.
We spoke a couple years, 2.5 years ago, and you were just starting to build out because of COVID, right? I know you guys have grown a lot in the past 2 years. What have been some of the major accomplishments or developments that you've seen at Fortitude Ranch?
Well, we've started franchising because we just, after the COVID, and it really wasn't COVID. Yes, it was related to the COVID pandemic, but it was less COVID because that was not a real pandemic. It was not a serious pandemic. The lethality rate was just way too low. But it caused such widespread loss of law and order periodically in the U.S. that people saw. Portland's, a prime example of that people started to realize, well, preppers already knew this, but non-preppers started to realize that, hey, if a lot of people start behaving badly, start looting, start breaking into businesses or even individual homes, police can't stop it. There simply are not enough police. When a lot of people start breaking the law, you can lose law and order overnight. And you saw it in places like Portland over and over and over again, and other cities as well. You see it periodically in areas like Baltimore. There are flash mobs that occur today. And, we saw it in the Hurricane Katrina aftermath, which should not have been a bad disaster, but because people panicked, because they weren't prepared, you saw widespread violence there and loss of law and order, policemen leaving their posts, truck drivers trying to do relief operations for New Orleans would not go into the city. There just was not enough law and order, not enough security. They refused to go into New Orleans unless they had National Guard escorting them in convoys. And that was a nothing event. Katrina should not have been, a major disaster. But our society is so frail. There's so many people, gang members, for example. There's over 1 million known gang members in the U.S., probably more. We have 2 million Americans locked up in prisons. The U.S. is plagued by a couple things. Number one, we have more lawyers than any other nation in the world. Number two, we have a legal system that locks up 2 million Americans. We have one of the highest incarceration rates in the world. We're right up there with some of the worst third world countries in terms of our incarceration rates. Well, if you've got 2 million people in jail as we do, and the electric grid goes down, they're not going to stay in jail. You cannot run I used to be a county commissioner. I can tell you from experience, jails have to have electricity. That's how you open and close doors, move prisoners around, keep them locked up. No electricity, jails don't work. So either prisoners are going to get out on their own or you're going to have to release them. Same way with the bad pandemic. And when I say a bad pandemic, I'm talking about something like H5N1, which, we've been calling it avian flu because that's what he started with, but we should stop calling it avian flu. It is not bird flu. It is today, because of mutations in the last couple of years, probably natural, but could be also man-made with gain of function research, or perhaps Russia deliberately modifying the virus that we've been tracking, Fortitude Ranch has been tracking in Poland. H5N1 is 60% lethal to people. So it's not the much, much less than 1% COVID-19 nonsense. It's a really deadly virus. And H5N1, biologists have been warning us for years, is going to become human-to-human transmissible. And we have made it human-to-human or mammal-to-mammal transmissible through gain-of-function research in ferrets and other animals. And we publish the results on how you do it, believe it or not. Your tax dollars were used to make a highly lethal virus transmissible between mammals, and of course humans are mammals. And then they published in an article how you do it. So Al-Qaeda, anyone who wants to do this, the technology is not hard, and the how to do it manual has been published for it. So sooner or later, that's going to happen. When that happens, when there's a bad pandemic, no one's going to work. If you go to work, if you expose yourself to other people, you'll get a virus, and you may be willing to die, but are you willing to bring it back home and kill off your family when they catch the virus? I don't think so. So policemen aren't going to work, and prison guards are not going to go to work when there's a bad pandemic. So again, 2 million Americans locked up. They're going to have to get out. They're either going to get out or they're going to be released. And at that point now, you've got 2 million prison members, 1 million gang members. Right off the bat, they're the kind of folks who are going to start marauding and stealing to get food to stay alive. But a pandemic or a grid down situation, that's not weeks or months, that's years that the devastation will last. More people are probably going to starve to death or be killed by marauders than are ever killed by a virus or because there's no electricity. You're going to get killed by the loss of law and order. So when that happens, I'm sorry, I'm so long-winded answer, but when that happens, you've got to have a place like Fortitude Ranch where you've got stockpiled foods, you've got chickens and the ability to farm and garden and hunt. And most importantly, you got a lot of people with weapons manning guard posts to keep the marauders away from your place. So we'll survive. Fortitude Ranch members will survive a collapse. If you're out on your own trying to survive in a city, I think in a big city, your chances are very, very small. Suburbs, not much better. And even on your own in a wilderness area, if you don't have a big group of people with weapons and organized and someone in charge that people are respecting, you won't make it.
Interesting. I didn't really think of like the avian flu as being more lethal than COVID. What I've noticed recently was there's this new like white lung thing going on in both Ohio and Massachusetts, and probably going to spread if that's related to the bird flu or if that's related to COVID or What are your thoughts?
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's different. And I kind of focus on H5N1. There's a lot of different viruses. There's other things that could spread and cause either a human pandemic or a plant virus loss that results in loss of food supplies worldwide. That could trigger a collapse as well. But H5N1 is not bird flu anymore. It's spreading in like 30 different mammal populations all around the world. Just recently, World Health Organization put out an alert. It's spreading in domestic cats in Poland. And I don't mean cats that are out in the wild, you know, running across a dead bird that died of avian flu, H5N1, and getting it from that. These are indoor cats. A lot of them, these cats never have exposure to the outside. So it's spreading in mammal populations. And when a virus like H5N1 is spreading in mammals, that means it's incubating in mammals. Viruses are always mutating. And what you're going to get is H5N1 living in mammal populations, mutating into a form that's air-to-air transmissible. And that's actually what we did in this gain of function research years ago, that they deliberately infected ferrets, waited for a version of that to mutate that could transmit through the air. And once they did that, they collected, and voila, you've got an air-to-air transmissible H5N1 virus that historically is about 60% lethal. Now, the new version could be a lot less lethal, but a lot less if it's double-digit lethality. Again, that's horrible. No one's going to go to work. They're going to want to stay alive, keep their family alive, and the economy doesn't function. So there's no food in your grocery store. Policemen, I don't blame them. Policemen are going to say, geez, should I keep going out on my job out in the public where I'm going to catch this virus and die, or should I stay home and protect my family? And it's other workers too. Think about nuclear power plants. You don't just turn a nuclear power plant off if you don't have enough people to man the plant. You have to keep that thing manned. Even if you shut it down, the water has to be flowing. There has to be electricity for backup generators to keep water flowing over those rods, or you get a meltdown and then a detonation and then a release of radiation that kills people. So we are just not prepared for a collapse. Our government does not prepare for it, doesn't even warn people about it. The vulnerability of the U.S. electric grid has been very well known for decades. There have been congressionally funded EMP commissions, electromagnetic pulse, warning about how even a little nation like North Korea with a crappy nuclear force that's not accurate doesn't have to be accurate if all you have to do is detonate one or two nuclear warheads high up in the atmosphere somewhere over the U.S., and the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse that it generates, is collected by those big wires and utility systems, goes to those giant transformers and blows them up. We know this. It's happened. Solar flares do it in the same way, but an EMP attack with a nuclear weapon would be far more devastating, and it's something you can force to happen. When that happens and those transformers blow up all across the U.S., you have no electricity for over a year. And that's really best case. It could be several years because we don't make many of those transformers in the U.S. And trying to get them replaced when there's no one working because there's mass starvation and marauding going on is going to be very difficult, maybe even impossible. The EMP Commission study estimated that when we lose the grid from a major EMP nuclear attack, we could lose 90% of the U.S. population, 90% dead, because there's no food production, there's no food distribution, and people start starving soon. And it's also, there's no water systems. Your municipal water system works because of electricity. If there's no electricity, there's no water pumps, pardon me, and there's no water system. So, you can only go 3 days without water before you start dying. So we are just very vulnerable. People know about it, but there's no willingness from politicians to fix it because there's no votes in it for them. And there's the risk of loss of votes. It will cost some money to harden the electric grid. It's not in a reasonably huge amount of money, but you're going to have to raise electric rates. And politicians are afraid that if they vote to harden the electric system, to force utilities to make the grid secure, that means their opponent can now say, hey, Congressman Schmuck just made your electric bill go up and you're spending an extra $200 a year now for your electric rate. Let's get him out of office. They're afraid of that. Plus, the utility companies don't want to do it, so they're lobbying against him. And so we don't do it. We've known for decades our electric system is a disaster. There's a video I would encourage all your viewers or your listeners to watch called Grid Down, Power Up. Professionally developed, pretty short documentary that explains why our electric grid is a disaster waiting to happen that could kill the vast majority of us. Dennis Quaid narrates it. It's won all kinds of awards. Tucker Carlson's about to do an interview on, has done an interview on it. It's all over the media. Grid Down, Power Up. You should watch it to understand, number one, why you need to be prepared, because our enemies know about how vulnerable our grid is. And you can take it down with EMP, with solar flares, with physical attacks, or with cyber. There's a lot of ways to take down the electric grid. And when it happens, it's game over. Most people are going to die.
Wow. So that's two risks. One is pandemics, one is a grid, and then you mentioned marauders, right? So I mean, I'm in suburban America. There were even marches here right before the last election. There's going to be an election coming up this coming year in 2024, and it's a possibility it's going to be Biden Trump again, and with that election, what do you see as a potential threat with the election? There might be a civil war or not, and the need for your survival community.
Well, my opinion's not that great on that, but I can tell you who is, a guy named Ray Dalio. He's the founder, CEO of Bridgewater, the largest, most successful hedge fund. And he makes his living by predicting things that are going to happen and then making investments, suspecting that, change X or Y is likely to happen in the next months or years. And he has already predicted a 30% chance of civil war in the next election because our country is so divided. And with Biden, Trump, that makes it, I think, even greater than 30% that things are going to break down. The nation is so split. Gun control, abortion, so many social and welfare issues where, we're absolutely divided. And, a lot of Americans like me, we realize that the 10th Amendment to the Constitution is gone. It was illegally erased in a 1937 Supreme Court case. And so you wonder, how can the government do all these things when the 10th Amendment says, hey, you can only do stuff in the federal government if it says in the Constitution you can do it? The post office, national defense, foreign policy. Why are you doing healthcare? That's completely illegal. It is. But the 10th Amendment was illegally and quietly erased in the 1937 Supreme Court decision. And more folks are aware of that. And I think in this coming election, they're going to hear more about it. And more people are going to say, why should we stay in the United States? I'm in Texas right now. There's a huge Texas independent movement. It's called Texit. Has huge support. And I think with the country potentially getting violent in this next election, with people saying, that's it, I'm not going to accept it. If my candidate loses, I'm not going to accept the other person winning. At a minimum, I think you could see places like Texas exiting, but other states say, why should we obey any limits? And there is no constitutional ruling on succession. It's silent. It's not covered in the Constitution. You could argue that the 10th Amendment says you can't do things that aren't authorized. You shouldn't be able to force a state to stay in the Union unless they've signed an agreement, a contract saying they're bound by it. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says a state can't succeed. And I think you're going to see Oregon, even potentially places like Colorado, where there's a big urban-rural Democratic Republican split, saying, that's it, we're through with this crap, we're out of here. And they could join Texas. Texas, as a country, would not be a small country, very significant force. And so I think I'm kind of rambling on here, but the Civil War could be election violence, it could be succession movements, it could be states breaking up or rural counties say, that's it, we're through with gun laws being passed by the state that our county sheriffs say are bullshit, they're not going to enforce them. More social programs and taxes coming. I can tell you that in Colorado and Nevada, for example, state officials have taken over zoning. They're forcing rural counties to adopt building codes and zoning crap that they do not want, but the big politicians, which is largely big Democrats in the state capitals with the majority of the votes, are cramming all kinds of laws and rules and regulations down the throats of rural conservative people. And a lot of them are going to say, that's it, we're out of this mess. They're not going to be the state government, and the federal government ignores the Constitution. The 10th Amendment is illegally ignored in federal programs. And a lot of people are going to say, that's it. The Constitution died in 1937, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And we're not going to deal with this crap anymore. That's the scenario for civil war next year that a lot of people think is likely. If you look in USA Today online, just Google 2024 Civil War. There was an article on it yesterday that more and more people are agreeing with Ray Dalio that the election next year could trigger a collapse and a lot of violence. I wouldn't want to be in Portland or Baltimore, or a lot of big cities. If there's another disputed election, or just the nation is so split, even doesn't have to be a close election. There'd just be a lot of people who say, that's it. The Biden supporters saying there's no way in hell I'm going to deal with Trump for 4 years. And the Trump supporters saying there's no way in hell I'm going to serve under Biden for the next 4 years. That's the way our country is. And I think the election's going to make it worse, not better. Should we talk about our Fortitude tokens since we're crypto, or?
No, we're going to talk about Fortitude tokens.
Okay.
I was just about to say, I'm shifting gears.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to do is, a lot of people will say to what you just said, they will say, opt out, buy Bitcoin. Okay. And you wrote an article back 6 years ago,
mm-hmm.
saying the NSA, the NSA were the ones who are Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin, right? So I want to see if your thoughts are still the same. Is NSA behind that, and what has changed? What new threats have changed so that the NSA might take a stance to kill Bitcoin if it wants to?
Well, I don't think that the NSA created Bitcoin. I think that Satoshi Nakamoto, the guy or gal or group that created Bitcoin, I think he was probably an NSA employee or an NSA contractor. I say that for a couple of reasons. Number one, Bitcoin uses a lot of NSA technology, crypto and hashing technology that NSA developed. So the person who founded Bitcoin, or persons, there's a good chance they're working for the NSA. So what's the impact of that? Well, I've worked for the federal government. I've worked for the Institute for Defense Analyses, a DoD think tank, been in the Pentagon and the Senior Executive Service. And when you work for the government, you cannot do outside employment, that's what they term it, unless you have approval. Most of the time you have to fill out some form, and your boss and maybe your boss's boss has to approve that. If you don't do that, you can get in a lot of trouble. And I think that explains why, the big mystery is, why the hell doesn't Satoshi cash in his Bitcoin? The guy's a billionaire, the girl or the group's a billionaire. Why had they never cashed it in? And I think they didn't do it because, at that point they could be revealed and found out that, hey, they're violating, they didn't have the contract, and, they could get into trouble. So I think that's another reason why it's a good chance that the Bitcoin developers, our developer, were working for the NSA. So next kind of topic is, why would the NSA want to destroy Bitcoin? I think there's a good reason they would want to, and that's because Bitcoin is used for ransomware. If North Korea is trying to, and they are trying to evade our sanctions on them, and they take that money and develop nuclear weapons, and they take a lot of their ransom when they do computer attacks in Bitcoin. And it's not just North Korea who does this. East European groups, and a lot of them are Russians. They also will take a lot of their ransomware in Bitcoin. It's a great way for criminals to take money. So there could be a legitimate national security reason for the president to order the NSA to say, I'm tired of North Korea continuing to develop nuclear weapons, exploiting this Bitcoin blockchain to take ransomware payments in, take it down. And they could take it down. Now, a lot of Bitcoin people are going to be screaming, saying there's no way in hell they could take it down. They wouldn't be able to take over the Bitcoin blockchain. And I'm confident the NSA could, for two reasons. First of all, they do the obvious thing that people acknowledge. They could bring up 1,000 or thousands of computers to start processing a Bitcoin blockchain and take it over, basically do the processing for it. But they don't just do the legitimate stuff. The NSA, the National Security Administration, they know how to do computer network attack. Probably the best organization in the world for executing a computer network attack. So all those big Bitcoin processing farms, in Iceland and all over the world, especially where they got cheap power, that have all these big computer networks processing Bitcoin, the NSA takes them out. So they bring up thousands of their computers. They take down other computers processing the Bitcoin blockchain, or trying to compete to make the next block of Bitcoin to fold in. They take it over, and then they start reeling it back, and they basically destroy the blockchain. They put in fake transactions, they take away money from recent transactions, and they screw up the Bitcoin blockchain. And there's no group to take it, put it back together. It's not like Ethereum or a private blockchain that has decentralization features, but at the same time, there's people who can intervene and get it going again. So the NSA could destroy the Bitcoin blockchain, and they'd have a rationale to do it to, stop North Korea's evasions of sanctions and making money they can use to develop nuclear weapons. And then also, frankly, the U.S. government probably would like to see, or some people in the U.S. government probably would like to see Bitcoin go away and crypto be damaged, especially if there's some plans to do a digital dollar down the road.
Now we get into Fortitude tokens, right? So the thought is this. The thought you would ask any maxi would say, if you kill Bitcoin, you kill all of crypto. There's no use for it. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to ask you your opinion. How is that going to affect Ethereum and other cryptos, including your utility token, the Fortitude token? What are your thoughts?
Sure. So Bitcoin was the first blockchain, and it's its own blockchain. There are better blockchains out there, and I'm not insulting Bitcoin to say that. They were the first. They get applause from everyone. Just a brilliant move. It's fantastic, and the way it's worked so long is great. But Ethereum's a completely different blockchain. So if you take down Bitcoin, Ethereum's still up and operating, as are up their other cryptocurrencies. But Ethereum is in my opinion, the best real blockchain. There's other, Hyperledger is a great private blockchain. A lot of people say, well, that's an oxymoron. You've got some people controlling it. So I'm not going to get into the philosophical debates of, is a blockchain that a group of companies or people control really, the same spirit as Bitcoin. It's not the same spirit, but it is a blockchain. So our token would continue to run as long as the Ethereum blockchain's up. And I don't see the government ever taking that one down, because there's so many tokens that run on it. And in our case, we are nothing like Bitcoin. Yes, we're a blockchain cryptocurrency, but we are a utility token, meaning a Fortitude token has real value in use. If you go to our website, fortituderanch.com, there's a page on tokens, and there's a price list there. If you've got, I'll just tell you an example. So if you want an economy room at a Fortitude Ranch for a 10-year membership, if you have 37.5 Fortitude tokens, that's the full price to buy that membership term and that membership type in Fortitude Ranch. So you can buy the tokens, you can trade them in. A lot of people have already bought our tokens, and some of them even have us holding them, because again, we're a survival company. So if there's a grid down situation, well, now the Ethereum blockchain is not running. If the grid's down, or at least it's not running where you can access it in the US, so a lot of people who bought our Fortitude tokens are holding them to eventually use to join Fortitude Ranch, but we hold them for them. So we know that they've got them. So we can do an offline, basically, transaction. You could take your 37.5 tokens that I know Jamil owns. He gets a hold of me on the phone or something. That's still up and working. And he could take his Fortitude. You could take your Fortitude tokens and join by doing that. And our plan is that when the shit's about to hit the fan, and let's say 60 Minutes does a story on H5N1 and scares the bejesus out of everyone, and we've got tons of people wanting to join. At that point, we will stop taking cash membership applications and say you can only join Fortitude Ranch by using our Fortitude tokens. A lot of people have already bought them. More people would buy them when that situation comes. So we expect the price of them would go up. But The key point is we are a utility token, meaning there is real value and use for our token. Bitcoin is strictly a cryptocurrency. You can't use it for some other function. And so we don't have to worry about SEC regulations or crackdowns on cryptocurrency. There's no equity features. A lot of cryptocurrencies, as you have partial ownership of something as a result of that, ownership of a company. We have no equity features for the Fortitude token. It's strictly a utility token used to buy Fortitude Ranch membership.
So that sounds good. So yeah, talking about the SEC, the Department of Justice, they recently fined Binance. There was a collapse in 2022 with Celsius and 3AC and all those. The market makers, has shifted in the industry, and I don't know, I hear that you're looking for someone to facilitate trading for your Fortitude token. So I'm wondering, in light of all the shifts in the market, what you need and how you see the market making playing out, and how somebody can facilitate your token.
Sure. Well, we're looking for someone who's crypto savvy to facilitate Fortitude training, either on Uniswap or if there's some better platform, someone who could do that. And if someone is interested in doing that, please email me. You can go to our website, fortituderanch.com, to find an email address, or I can just tell you it's manager@fortituderanch.com. We have very low trading volume. A lot of ERC20 tokens are in that category. And so there's sites like Uniswap and others to do that. Uniswap is not easy to use. I would like to find a more easy to use platform, but if anyone's interested in making a market for us, helping to facilitate trading, please contact me. We'd love to work with you and would definitely support you with Fortitude tokens that we would pay you for to get more liquidity in our token. In terms of the SEC, again, I do not see the SEC as a threat ever to utility tokens, and not really to the Ethereum blockchain, because there's so many business applications that are running on that if the SEC tried to take down Ethereum, I don't see that ever happening. They would be upsetting too many businesses, too many non-equity, no security features involved that the SEC has absolutely no business doing it. And, I'll just say a couple more things about the Securities Exchange Commission. The stuff they do there, it violates the 10th Amendment. That's a given. But it's more than that. Some of the crap that the SEC enforces is just criminal. They ought to be taken to jail for it. The term accredited investors. If you want to invest in a lot of companies, you have to be an accredited investor. That's the SEC term, and it's a effing lie. It is a stupid lie. Accreditation means you've got some education. You've passed a course. You've got some knowledge. It's a complete lie. An accredited investor, that's the SEC terms, all it means is you're rich. You've got a lot of money. You've got a lot of net worth. But they don't say, hey, you've got to be rich or you can't invest, because that sounds horrible, and it is. So they lie. The SEC is a bunch of liars, and they tell people, oh, you can only invest if you're an accredited investor, meaning you got experience or education. It's a complete damn lie. The SEC ought to be thrown in jail for telling lies like that. Accredited investor, all it means is you're rich and wealthy. And so if you don't have a lot of money and you want to invest in a Facebook or Fortitude Ranch or some up-and-coming company that can make you a fortune, our federal government, ignoring constitutional limits, ignoring personal liberty, and then lying through their teeth saying you have to be an accredited investor, will stop you because you're poor, so you're not allowed to invest. That's the Securities and Exchange Commission. Those people belong in jail. They shouldn't be enforcing laws. They ought to be put in jail, and the other people who back them up with all the lies they tell. Sorry, I'm not a fan of the SEC, as you may have detected.
Neither am I. So we have things in common then, Drew. So
we love blockchain too.
I have a weekly show that I do called the X Factor, and with the Crypto Hipster, and I'm always trashing and bashing the SEC. So yeah. So I do have another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You are launching a new app called Collapse Survivor. We really didn't get into it, but that's a new one for you. What is that all about? How will it work? Just give us a 10,000 foot overview.
Sure. Collapse Survivor is a new app that will about to start beta testing about a month, should be released in February, March timeframe. And basically, I former military as an intelligence officer. I used to write what we called command post or tabletop exercise scenarios. So country X is doing this, they're building up for war, and we get message traffic coming in telling us what's happening. It's all simulated, it's not real, but it helps you practice things like tracking threats, preparing for war, moving forces around, and then fighting a war. But it's simulated war. It's a simulation. It's an exercise, and you learn a lot from that. And you really get into a scenario and get really great future experience, is the term we use. So, Collapse Survivor is going to cover collapse disasters, grid down, pandemics, AI disasters, cyber attacks, all kinds of different ways. Yellowstone blows up and blocks out clouds, and we've got massive crop failures around the world. We track over 50 different threats at Fortitude Ranch. So Collapse Survivor will have weekly simultaneous play scenarios where they come out. The other thing the app gives you is it'll give you the threat alerts that Fortitude Ranch gives right now just to our members. If you have the app, you'll get it. So if you're listening to this next year, this recording, and it's later on, Google or go on to Android and Apple and look for Collapse Survivor app. It's going to be very inexpensive to play. We're going to give it away free, but it's going to promote awareness of threats and encourage people to prepare, because the government's not being honest with you. They're not telling you about new technologies that raise threats to us. They're not telling you about CDC, Center for Disease Control, hasn't mentioned H5N1 for the past year, and the virus is mutated. It's spreading in mammal populations all over the world. It's going to be human transmissible and cause the worst pandemic in humans' experience, and it could end up wiping out most of us. But the CDC is a government agency, and their priority is not protecting you. Their priority is keeping the top officials looking good. Yep, we're in control. Everything's good. Don't worry, people. The government will take care of you, and you should just keep reelecting us because we're doing such a great job. So they don't warn you about what's happening with H5N1. And even the World Health Organization, the report I mentioned with the H5N1 spreading in domestic cats, they buried a lot of the information because they can't afford to upset Poland. And government agencies are like that. Their priority is not honest information or prioritizing service to citizens. It's helping themselves. And the final example I'll give you that is Mount Weather. It's in Virginia. It's a fantastic survival facility that you all are paying for if you're a U.S. taxpayer. That's where your congressmen and senators will go. Beautiful facility for them and their families. They'll be kept alive. By the way, they even have media rooms where they can continue to try to put out press releases, in case they're running for re-election. The rest of us have nothing, but government is certainly doing everything they can to make sure that Mount Weather is well prepared, and Site R, Raven Rock, the other locations, but nothing for us. Your government prioritizes themselves. It does not prioritize your welfare. They are not honest, from SEC lies about accredited investors to honest warnings from the Center for Disease Control. They're not honest, and they're not prioritizing your welfare or safety.
I agree. I agree. I want to thank you very much for your time today. This has been an amazing conversation. And I have one final question. It's probably the easiest one. It's how can people find out more information about you, about Fortitude Ranch, about buying your tokens, about being part of your community? How can they do that?
It's all on our website, fortituderanch.com. Collapse Survivor, when that comes out, has a different website, but we'll also have links to it from the Fortitude Ranch website. And again, we just encourage people, whatever preparations you can afford to do them, because with new technology, Elon Musk talks about artificial intelligence about once a week, at least, it seems. But there's a lot more threats in artificial intelligence that could take down our grid or poison our water supplies or do all kinds of other things. And it's going to happen. You need to be prepared if you want to survive. Otherwise, we're going to be left with the congressmen and top officials who survive and marauders. We're about trying to keep some middle-class good Americans alive, too, at Fortitude Ranch.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jamil. Look forward to hearing this.